Hi guys, I am delighted to show you a sunny day out here. As droughty of a summer as we've had, we had about 10 days of rain. Sometimes it was sheets of rain, and I'm hoping that the water table is back up again, and I think it'll be so good for my woodland trees. So I'm very happy. Of course, the grass and weed mix that I call a lawn is much happier than it has been all summer. But let me take you around and show you what's happening in the garden. This will be a little mini September garden tour at the end of September. And even though I've trimmed back some of these, I am getting new blooms on my cannas. And my cannas have delighted me to no end this year. They got a rough start with leaf rollers, but as soon as they got a little thicker and sturdier, it ceased to be a problem, and they kind of took off growing, and they've been producing these tall flowers. And the flowers aren't that much to look at, but the hummingbirds that come and visit certainly are a thrill. And then over here, some of the things are looking beaten down just because we had heavy rain, as I mentioned. But the elephant ears really appreciated all that rain, as they're normally grown in tropical situations. And I don't know if I've shown you this new bush I planted. Pardon the air conditioner. It's now gotten very warm again. But I did plant a small butterfly bush. This dwarf shrub I planted is a butterfly candy lil raspberry. So that is a dwarf buddleia, and it only gets 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. So that'll be nice to tuck in over here. And it is not a sterile variety. I did go shopping for a sterile variety, but I fell in love with the color of these blooms. So I'm looking forward to seeing that grow in front of my lilac trees that are here. One of them lost a lot of leaves, but has a lot of buds all over. And I did cut back my black-eyed Susans. They were dried up. And as we go over here, I have to tell my neighbor to come on this side to gather his really big pumpkins, because sometimes he'll pull squash from over the fence if it grows over, but these are really big. Let me just show you the size of some of these. I don't even know if you can see, but they're so big they fell through my azaleas here. They're not damaging anything, but they're big and heavy, so the gravity takes them down. But there they are. So fall is definitely here. And here we have some more glorious elephant ears, having enjoyed the rain. My miscanthus grasses have pretty much been crushed, so I may do a little trimming before the fall. I usually like to leave them up through the winter and cut them back in the spring, and therefore I leave a little shelter for some of the wildlife out here. But it is looking a little bent over here. It's leaning forward from the heavy rains. And I'll tell you what, I got one lamb's ear this summer and put it in. I divided it into 2, and they have gotten huge, and they have all kinds of different plantlets coming up. They're absolutely enormous, and they didn't seem to mind our pretty harsh summer. And of course they also enjoyed the heavy rains. Over the last few years, I've taken a lot of cuttings of my various sedums, or sometimes I'll even pick it up off the floor of a garden center and pop it in a pot. And so you'll see lots of pots of these. Over here in the tomato jungle, which I've decided is going to be a squash jungle next year, I have done a chop and drop. The only thing still growing is this small squash, and I think it's a honey nut squash. And I have 2 of those, and I really don't know if they're going to color up in time for me to eat. So I can't say that's a big harvest, but it's always a thrill if you can grow a little bit of winter squash. It may have been a regular butternut that just didn't reach its full potential because there were lots of tomatoes. But as you can see, everything has been chopped and dropped. And I may mulch this with leaves so everything breaks down by spring, but I basically took all the fertility that grew up in that bed and chopped it down and returned it right in place. And that is how I get really nice soil in my do-it-yourself raised bed. I did have some hosta that were looking kind of rough, but I left a lot of the leaves up over here. This is a spot where there's hosta and it gets way too much sun. So it's gonna take a while for my little coral bark maple back here to grow to any size to offer it some shade. But you can see the red stems there. But it's looking better after 10 days of rain, and I leave it up because it turns a beautiful golden yellow in the fall. So even though the edges are tattered, I do appreciate that fall color. And then over here, these are the hostas that are in the correct place, and they're a gorgeous deep green. They only had a few leaves that didn't look so great, but they too will turn a beautiful gold in just a couple weeks. And I'm delighted over here with my Japanese maple. This was in a pot for maybe 3 years, just a little seedling. And it's grown large enough that I've put it here. It's about 4 feet tall. It's very hard to see against all the greenery in the background. But it was in this pot, and this little contorted evergreen was in the ground in that spot, and I think it'll do better in this pot, and then the tree will do much better back there. But I was really happy that this tree got so much rain. So let's go up here. I'll show you what's happening up here. I've been taking all of the large boxes I've gotten and made a cardboard path, which of course looks very messy now, but by the end of the month it'll be covered with leaves, and it'll just be a leaf path. And the cardboard is there so that I don't have any weeds popping through. So I do that every couple years. I kind of refresh my cardboard and leaf path, and it just kind of keeps that path through the woodland open. I did do a little bit of rearranging here, and I have a new heuchera. Luckily I've saved the tag, and this is called Heuchera Northern Exposure Black. So it is indeed a black heuchera. So I think that is so interesting. It is a sun to shade plant. It's almost black. It's really interesting. So it's not exactly a bright pop of color. Interesting pot of texture. So I just have this little assortment, and I moved the chives over there, and they were over here getting eaten up by some of the Vinca minor. And my coleus have gotten absolutely enormous. I should keep my polytunnel closed because it's a little messy inside, but they have gotten to be about 3 feet tall, at least this variety, and they've all gone to flower. And they're not the most attractive, but I do leave them up because I think that the wildlife enjoys it. The pollinators come and visit these little tiny flowers. So I do keep those out. Here's a bee visiting. So this is exactly why I leave these flowers on, even though most people grow coleus for its foliage. And then here, I'm very excited. I've never grown eggplant before, but I do have some eggplant. And my biggest one is under here. I think it's called white icicle. Here's a big one under here. Lots of them are forming here. These are smaller ones. Even if this plant did not grow fruit on it, it's such a beautiful plant. I love the shape of the leaves, and the flowers are this gorgeous lavender. That one's a little old, but the blooms are just beautiful. The leaves are beautiful. I feel like it's really an ornamental plant. And here, this is a bed that's going to be seeing some changes. I did plant some orac I had grown in seed cells. It's hard to see because it's red orac, and that's a winter green, although it's red. I do have some beans planted here, which I did basically for soil fertility, but maybe I'll get some green beans from it. And I'll probably be taking out my cannas soon when we get down into the 50s at night, perhaps. And I've kept this in because I like to chop and drop the foliage. But it is producing baby fruits, but they're not amounting to anything. I probably don't have enough blooms, and the length of the day probably isn't suitable for growing squash plants like that. And I do have some snow peas going up a trellis, not that many, but I had to restart them several times. I have some of my tall marigolds still blooming and more tall coleus. And throughout here I have purple sprouting broccoli planted. And the seedlings didn't look like much of anything while I was growing them, but they've really taken off here. So they're scattered throughout this bed, and hopefully in the spring I'll have some purple sprouting broccoli to enjoy. And then over here, my refurbished lavender has done really well. And this bed is emptier, but I do have a couple cabbages that took. This is a Michivili cabbage. And now that I've ripped out all the tomatoes, my black-eyed Susan vine was doing a little bit of blooming, but now it seems like it's past its prime. But it may have made seed pods. I think these are little seed pods, so I will definitely try to save the seeds on this. We'll see. I mean, it did hold its own with a bunch of tomatoes growing around it, but it didn't do much blooming since it was covered up so much. And we have some more bees back here on this coleus, enjoying the flowering. And of course, this is a big time of year to do seed saving. This is a spent cosmos flower. They're one of the easiest things to collect seed from. They just open up, and all of these small little black seeds are potential plants for next year. They like to open up on sunny days and let themselves dry before they fall, but I'm going to take a few of them in. Looks like we have 3 buds to collect here. So I'm a big seed saver, guys. And the plants that you save seed from and plant the following year are always acclimated best to your area. And I do have some rutabaga, which seem to be getting really big in here. This is my rutabaga. So those seem to be doing well, and hopefully I'll have some of those, maybe even by Thanksgiving. And we'll come along here. I've been busy putting all of the garden debris and my friend's garden debris and my compost operations back here. So it's kind of a messy corner, but it's amazing how quickly these plant materials break down when they're put in a compost pile. The microbes and the bugs find it, and it's good eating for them. And let me take you over here. As you know, the rustic garden bed was kind of a disappointment this year with all the roots coming in, but hopefully the things I planted late in the season will really do nicely for me for next year. Some of the ferns, of course the coleus will die back, but I did add some euchera. These euchera look pretty good back here, the purple ones, and I have Dale's Choice, I think it's called, here. And I have some very interesting fungus which appreciated all the rain, especially this one here. I think that's absolutely beautiful. It's almost like a garden sculpture. So I can't tell you what the name is of that, but it's growing right in front of my carex there. That's a new carex I added. So hopefully we'll see this bed looking better next year with some of the things that I've already done. Oh, I do have some nice little mums here. These were cuttings I took. I didn't realize they were purple, so I'm kind of happy about that. Here's another carex I added. And everything I'm adding now is meant to be in shade. So I'm hoping that by going towards shade plants and woodland plants, I'm gonna have better success with this garden. And then all along here, I had bins, which I decided to remove because all the tree roots would come up into the bins and try to get the water that I was putting in there. So my husband calls this our fairway. I seeded this and I had good luck growing grass back. So you can almost not tell where my little bin garden was. It's always a thrill if you can get grass to grow. And then back here I have lots of sedum around the yard. These I've taken cuttings from and just rooted in different pots, and they're of course all in bloom because of the season. And I planted one of my little trees that wasn't doing so well in my topiary garden, and it's already showing signs of new growth. I think it really likes being planted, but it's nice to have little dwarf shrubs planted around the woodland. And over here I had planted a seed of a Big Mac's pumpkin, and it's flowering its head off, but of course this is not the season for things to be making fruit. There's just not enough daylight hours at this time of year. And I have a lot of my eupatorium falling over. My fig trees are doing well. I have one here, and I also have one over here, so they're doing fine. They got absolutely no attention this year from me. Here's another little dwarf Alberta spruce, which I planted maybe last year, and you can see how well they do once you pop them in the ground. It's nice to enjoy them in the pot for a year or so and then put them out where they really should be planted. And this is, I think this is called columnar basil. It's kind of a sturdy basil, which I really liked. And my Joe Pye wheat has all gone to seed, and the seeds are blowing everywhere, so I expect my Joe Pye weed to be spread all over next year. This garden has done okay. Some of the plants have done better. I planted some of my lovage, which was in my container garden. I moved it over here across the back. And that's sort of like a perennial that tastes like celery. So we'll see if it comes back next year. But it's got a very vigorous root system, so hopefully it can hold its own in this very root-bound bed. This is a woodland garden bed that all the tree roots come into, so we'll see how it does if it comes back next year. My lilies seem to have done okay. And of course the coleus seem to do well everywhere. They just do really well. My parsley is looking good. I'll have to come out and harvest some of that. This is my Zen garden, and everything back here really needed a drink. I have an azalea my friend Lori gave me, and another hydrangea my mother-in-law gave me probably 30 years ago. This is a hydrangea cutting I planted, so I'm hoping that'll do well for me. It looks like it's taken. I did plant that a couple months ago back here, and I gave it some water along the way, but there's nothing like rainwater, guys. I don't know if I showed you, but I added a couple of little sun plaques up there, so maybe if I see more I'll keep adding to that collection. It's nice to see all that color. My marigolds along the back are still looking colorful. And I have some yellow mums up near the house. But over here, this garden is mostly about foliage, and my guacamole hostas were so happy to get some rain. And things look good back here. And my spider plants, which I bring in every winter, were happy for the rain as well. And my succulent garden is going strong. You know, you can't go wrong with succulents when you have a hot summer. They survive really well. I even have some blooms on this one. This is my ace plant. You can see how pretty they are. They're like daisy-like blooms. And here's a view of the long sunny border down there, and you can really see how much I chopped and dropped. And that grass in the spring, when it's all dried out, will also be chopped and put on that bed. So that's how I keep that one filled. But I am very happy to see the sun today. As much as I wanted rain, I'm very happy that we did get some rainfall, and the things around the garden could have a long 10-day drink. One thing that really came back to life after our recent weather was the alyssum. It appreciates cooler weather, and it appreciated all the rain. So we have lots of tufts of beautiful little flowers. They're also very fragrant, and they are a pollinator's favorite. So I have purple and white all through here, and all throughout. Almost every topiary reseeded itself with alyssum. I do have a couple of Johnny Jump Ups which also reseeded themselves, so I love those. I don't know if you can see the little purple flower there. You have to look close at some of these smaller flowers. I do think my little topiary gardens look good from every angle, and that's important in a patio space like this. I am going in and out, and we do see it from all angles. This is how my house looks in the fall. This is some zinnia seeds from some zinnias I had in this vase. So I decided they were so pretty that I would pull the seeds off when they dried out a bit, and they look beautiful. A lot of them have that nice dark color that you look for in a viable seed. So I'm gonna let those dry, probably not in the middle of my family room. But this is the thing I like to do most in the fall, is gather some seeds from my own garden, doing some seed harvesting. So glad you could join me in my fall garden today for a little tour, and I hope you're having fun in your gardens.